Hello and welcome to episode number 30 of Comprehending Consciousness. My name is Allie with A. Marie Speaks, and this series is an attempt at bridging the gap between the 3D and the 5D, those who are newly waking up to those who have been awake for quite a while perhaps. Some of the terms and phrases that are commonly used and that are now kind of trickling down into the mainstream I feel are carrying a lot of misconceptions, distortions, that I am hoping with this series to kind of clear the ground around and to kind of offer up my perception along with some of the mainstream deviations and what I feel I don't align with or what I feel I do align with. A lot of times in this series I'll call it a tour of the tip of the iceberg. Hoping, that inspiring others that they will take the time later on to come back to the iceberg, to put on the diving gear, to go and do their own deep dives and explore the topic for themselves and find what really is true to them and resources that they vibe with and maybe references even that I don't even acknowledge in the videos, going out and seeking that kind of information for yourself if you're inspired to, right? So today's topic for episode number 30, I thought I would do and pick up the same theme I did from number 1, which the original episode I did was woke versus awake, and I kind of talked about this distortional hijacking of awakening and how the mainstream's calling it woke, and they've taken it and they have a whole inverted, taken and put on its head, taken and turned upside down, or the opposite of, sort of, right? Woke and made it this, especially in America, and I think it's kind of like permeated out throughout the world from America. That kind of spoiled version of woke. And so with episode 30 here, I'm hoping to do the same verses, except talking about the Gnostics versus Gnosis. And so if this topic has inspired you and you're new to my channel and you just saw you like to learn about Gnostics or Gnosis inspires you or whatever, and you search that, welcome to my channel. I talk about all types of different things. If you're finding me on YouTube, you can check me out on BitChute for other topics and playlists on things that are more aligned with the negative agenda and talking about the matrix and things like the archons. If that kind of working or seeking inspires you, you can find other videos on my BitChute channel. I'll put a link in the YouTube section for people if you find me on YouTube. But for today's video for 30, what I hope to do is just a quick comparison. This also, to say at the beginning here, I forgot, but it inspired by comments that I actually received on BitChute, asking me kind of a little bit about the Gnostics and my opinion of them. And so I wanted to reply to the comment, create a video for content, but I just thought it aligned really well with the progression of comprehending consciousness and having 30, the Trinity, hearkening back to the original with the same kind of setup as the video and title and the same kind of proposition of these different distortions I'm going to talk about. They reflect kind of the same metaphor to me and the same kind of energetic working. I just thought it was beautiful, a beautiful progression set up for this, for my series. Perfect. So, to just get started, I guess, with all that build up and generalities, the comparison that I would like to use as the examples of the Gnostics versus Gnosis is the same comparison that I originally was weighing back and forth with woke and with awakened, or to be awake. not to say that I feel like the Gnostics are our generation of woke kind of clumping of humanity that we portray in the mainstream as like our woke of individuals these days. Because also, that's a double-edged sword depending on who you talk to. Um, it can be a good or bad thing depending on your preference. I feel it's relevant and important to compare and look at the Gnostics from that same kind of skeptical, curious approach, which also really has this underlying I struggle to find a word to really I hate, not hate, but I dislike to use, or uncomfortable to use the word faith here, because I know it triggers some people who are more scientific thinking or not dogmatic, or perhaps were raised in the box of religion somehow, and so faith is really like a false word to them. I wasn't raised around that kind of structuring, and I kind of came around full circle to the word faith, and now I really see it as a beautiful kind of frequency or setting of stability, a foundation, I guess, is kind of what I can see, or I'm speaking of when I say the word faith. I have kind of a deep faith-based knowing that all information that we're presented with in this world has been run through the matrix, or the archons, the controllers of information, whatever you want to look at it as, the names or whatever you want to put on the labels of the people. The fact of the matter is there's some kind of overlay here that controls information and the sharing of information. What information is available, what is destroyed, what is hidden, what is not allowed for public viewing. If you like to look at it just as simplistically, more way 3D and inside the matrix, it's kind of like national security clearances and need to know kind of hierarchies. That kind of protection, but it's a false protection of information. The corralling of data and available sources, that is always very heavy and prevalent in my underlying foundation, in that faith-based knowing, is that everything that we're presented with is in front of us as a choice point given by the matrix. And they don't ever present information that they don't have choice points, like dominoes set up behind. So to be careful and mindful of all information, always, and what we choose to pull into our inner world, what we choose to work with in discernment, what we choose to incorporate into our knowing, and also, most importantly, what we repeat or parrot back, because it seems foolish to me to grab onto chunks and hold on to certain sources as totally reliable, as totally, untainted, so to speak. I feel a better safe than sorry type of approach to everything, especially knowledge. And so, yeah, when I'm looking at these, and I have to get to my point here because I hate to have these videos, these comprehending consciousness I like to try to keep short. But the comparison between the Gnostics and woke is that these are portrayed versions, sort of from mainstream or from academia world sort of presentation, and ultimately controlling. So they come from control mechanism. And so I love the ideas, and I have lots of references and lots of um, I've spent lots of time watching a whole variety of different angles at the Gnostics, and people talk about them, people I like to listen to, people I've never heard talk about them. Everybody has a pulling towards them because they're ancient knowledge. It's sort of like talking about Plato or Socrates or something. Um, Pythagoras, you always find these kind of niche um, ideologies and groupings of people, even followings of certain people, um, who they have, it, you can sense great truths in there. But I just am hesitant to really nail down and take in information about it and say it's definitely true, or say I completely go along with this, or I love this person's teachings, or um, you know especially when we start to get into gospels and things with Bible, and more of that sort of presented stories and films and plays and all of that. Every story is written and recorded by man, by a human being, and by somebody within a duality and a certain scope of conscious awareness, right? There are settings that are just on there, on all of us, always in this plane and space and time of this world. And so it's been written and recorded by a person, and so it has a bit of bias in there, regardless. That's just the way that I see everything. And so looking at the angle of religions and the Gnostics in general, right, I have always been a seeker of information. I love stories. Not only am I, loving to pull in research information and scientific knowledge, I love stories and fiction, and I love to write and explore, fantasy and all types of things, science fiction and all that, historical fiction and real history. I love anthropology and seeking of roots and ancestry and our truth and our real, what's behind humanity and all of that. So, in my crossings over the decades of this exploration, I've come across the Gnostics many times, and I've come across all types of things like the Bible and the Cathars and the Catholics and all of these more mainstream kind of battles and opposing things that we have and that were shown and it's showcased in the Matrix. But I never, when I'm taking in that information, I do it mostly almost as a mainstream media level of entertainment. I don't ever take it as, maybe I used to more in my young 20s and stuff, especially in my teenage years. I really thought that I was storing data that was truthful, kind of, when I found truth, or even, because I was more of a fringe person, but let's not get into that. Anyways, so as I've come and I've never taken the stance, especially with religion and history around, centered around that kind of thing. I've never taken a stance to where that information is actually real and solid and totally trustable and totally actually happened. But that hasn't deterred me from learning and from seeking. But it just, when I take in information, and when I've watched any kind of historical videos, timelines about the church, about Jesus, about different gospels and Bibles and things that were taken out and put in and changed around and all this stuff, there is infinite seeking over there. And I do like, and I appreciate that kind of information. I do watch a lot of things on it, but my brain and my understandings, I'm not storing data points with names and entries like on a timeline so much, that thinking that it's real and true and that these people were real people that actually lived. And some of them were and some of them weren't. And there's a million examples of both, and in-betweens, and disguises and false names. And it's just... When I take in that kind of stuff, I take it in like information, like entertainment information. And I'm seeking commonalities through generalities. And that kind of information, when I see synchronistically things lining up, when I see repetition of a theme or a template, or I see the same kind of type of person represented across different cultures and tribes or times and things like that, that's the kind of things that I pick up and stick with me about actual points of knowledge. Other than that, it's kind of in one ear and out the other. Yeah, I take it in vibrationally, and it goes into the subconscious, of course, and it's in the recordings, I'm sure, up there. But I don't put a lot of weight or faith in that. I put weight and faith in the overall meaning and the vibe between whether I feel a truth in there or not, and whether I feel a lot of distortions or not. And if I feel a lot of distortions, I cast them aside. You know, I used to hold on to them and think I needed to go through and find the truths when I felt lies percolating into information or in a documentary that I'm watching or a book I'm reading or something. But now I've kind of let it go, and now I kind of cast them aside. They don't serve me in my present moment right now. I know they're lies. That's the only thing that we're being asked about. Following true intention, following truth, and seeking a positive way through. That's, you know, that's the name of the game. That's where your points are made or scored or whatever, in my humble opinion, of course. And also for positively aligned seeking people on that side of the spectrum, right? But anyways, so that's the kind of thing that I'm doing when I'm listening to information. And when I was asked about the Gnostics or Gnosis, and they were referenced a couple of people, like the names are like ding ding, little lights kind of off in the distance, like, oh, we've heard that before, we referenced that. Some of them, like one of them was Terrence McKenna, and I see him a lot, and I do listen to a lot of his kind of rambles. I like to listen to ramblers while I'm like doing the dishes or something else, you know, or whatever, different times of the day or something, if I feel like doodling or something. I like to listen to those kind of philosophical talkers, you know, Alan Watts or Terrence McKenna and all these different people, lots of different people. You know, but other than that, like certain names, like John D, and I'm like, oh, I sort of remember that, but I had to go back and look and go through some of my reference points and look at some of my resources, people that I know I've listened to them talk about it before, to bring it up and to be like, oh yeah, that guy, oh yeah, he was like worked in a weird angle in the church. He was kind of like an occult guy, kind of got into black magic-y stuff, and but he was, you know, interesting, and I just think that having that kind of approach to remembering, recalling, and then going back to your resources, going through things and looking at them again in the present moment makes more sense to the way that we should move through information, store it, hold it, recall it, share it, talk about it, is more of a free-flowing kind of way of that, to where it's okay to just kind of let things go and then bring them back. Because also I feel like it's helpful in understanding the main kind of difference between having real, quote-unquote, actual people like the Gnostics, and going and finding information about them and getting wrapped up in the portrayal of information that's in the reflective collective. Unfortunately, it's tainted by the negative agenda mostly. But you're going to spend all your time digging at actual, like, who were they, who, you know, had the church, and the unfortunate thing is, like, all the information these days, until, like, they, you know, the libraries were interesting, and I'll probably say the name wrong, Nagasaki libraries or something. I have read those a while ago. I've read some of them. I listened to some audios of them and stuff, and they are so interesting to me, the writings within them, and I highly suggest checking them out. There's a million things on YouTube about them for free. You can get readings of the actual texts or people talking about them and how they were found and stuff. Now, this is my thing between the Gnostics and Gnosis, and what I prefer, the approach that I prefer, which is the Gnosis approach, which is the understanding that to know the knowings and to do the work of the practice, and to be alive in the moment with the energetic exchanges and the spiritual embodiment of life, you come into Gnosis, your own Gnosis. You are Gnosis. And you become a Gnostic, not a sketched out, chalked version in a history book that people have put their perceptions and their ideas upon, scribbled the face out because they didn't like the guy at one point. Somebody else came trying to erase it and redrew it from memory of what he remembered the face to be at one point when he saw him when he was 5 years old, 27 years ago. And then oh, that's him, that's his face, I know it is, let's look for this guy. That is getting wrapped up in 3D matrix knowledge and data points and falsities, and then taking them in and incorporating them like they're true, and then building on that, and then wondering why your house of cards is toppling over and everything looks like crap and you can't find the guy. Versus listening to the teachings, hearing the knowing of it, getting into your place of Gnosis and doing the practice, and then you are that guy. Then you are the Gnosis. Then you are living it. And you don't have to worry about what others are saying about it, or the drama, or the gossip about it. You don't have to go back. I mean, you can, and like I'm saying, if it's enjoyable, if it's entertainment to you, if it fills your cup up, and it gives you extra points to talk about or references for later, or other examples to see it in a different angle, that you can keep adding up these different views for a whole 360 view. If that's the kind of approach that you're looking back at that kind of thing with in the seeking, then that's great. And that's what I'm saying about what is Gnosis. Also, what's the difference between being woke and awake? Being awake is actually doing the work, actually seeking the truth, actually being alive in yourself, in your present moment, for your best, highest good. And Gnosis, in my version of it, permeates the same way. And I'll give a beautiful example of this, just as an understanding, because you can go look at any of my videos and listen to me talk on my podcast, blogs that I've written, even just newer things since I've had my site up for maybe the past year or two. But I've done writing and things for a long time before that as well. The synchronicities between the information that I get through my own connection to divine source, the imagination space, the conscious collective, ancestors, my guides during meditation, internal introspection, imagination, curiosity seeking and building, all of these different varieties of mental workings have brought me great knowings, great understandings. Yeah, I use points from my direct world and experiences, catalysts that I'm moving through, to use them to bounce information off of, to see what happens, to see the repercussions and the consequences and how it acts out in physicality. But all of that is built in the mental world and comes through the mental world for everyone and for me. And when I went back to look specifically at the Gnostics and get some historical references and to pull information about Giordano Bruno, because I had remembered that he was persecuted, but I couldn't really remember his exact details. And same thing with John Dee. Like, I could kind of remember the name, but I almost only remembered it. I almost linked him with Aleister Crowley, thinking in my head, but that's because he aligns with the same type of entities and workings to me in my personal library storage of information. But when I went back and looked at, and I was listening to different people talking about it and stuff, I found, and I'll put this link actually because I really did enjoy this talk of Graham Hancock, and I hadn't actually looked at Graham Hancock's angle on the Gnostics before, but I found this YouTube video, 15 minutes maybe, a lecture of his, and he gets into the Gnostics bit. And the things that he was talking about their angle of looking at the archons and stuff, and I actually didn't really ring ding into my direct world when I talk about the archons so much, that I always kind of approached it, and my closer, more examined references of the phrases of the archons really comes through Carl Jung or Rudolf Steiner and stuff. Like, of course, I've had many times of passing through information of the Gnostics, and like I said about I have listened to audios of the Nagasaki libraries, and of course, like concepts like Thoth. Oh, I forgot about this to bring in too. Thoth or Thoth, whatever you want to call it. The Emerald Tablets I've read quite a few times as well. Those are great. but they can be taken as, fiction, or they can be taken as real. And I've examined, and I love to examine both avenues, and everywhere in between too. And a million different references. People who hated them, people who like them, people who believe them, people who don't. Looking at all of those different angles, they're all available out there. And for me, that's always the way that I have looked at things. And I'll link that Graham Hancock. But the thing about that was, synchronistically, I'm pulling and understanding, getting understandings and workings and seeing, talking about the archons, and the Gnostics talk about the same thing, and they had the same sort of view. And I didn't pull that directly from them, and I never anchored that information into my truth knowing and gave them credit for it. And especially because I didn't see it as pulling credit from them. I really didn't see it like they influenced me. I'm not like a follower of the Gnostics like so deeply that I knew that idea and that verbiage directly, those workings directly align with theirs as well. But as I was listening to him talk, I was like, wow, this is a lot of stuff that I actually talk about that I'm pulling out of my truths, and I'm getting from collective consciousness a lot. And to me, that's when I know, bing, these things have truth to them. And that's the difference between Gnosis and being in your Gnosis and being a Gnostic. We all get information from the same place and space. And the great imagination space and the conscious collective, the Akashic, whatever you want to call that, it's available to all of us across space and time. There is no separation. This isn't a linear thing happening here. And that's a great example of it, because living in your truth and seeking out real truth information leads to the same avenues and ways of viewing things as others, as the Gnostics, and being in the state of Gnosis, being in that confident state of just, I know, I am capable of knowing, I am capable of grasping information, and all of this kind of stuff. It comes through just being in the practice, and then you get a feel for real. Then you get a feel for what knowing and Gnosis within yourself and body is. And then when you want to go, if you want to go and do historical seeking, if you want to try to find real truths, if you want to hearken anything into you and tie it up and believe it and incorporate it with you, that's great, and go for it. But you'll have that firm foundation, the actual truth of Gnosis, what the Gnostics were trying to teach. They don't care about themselves. And I'm sure, I love to think of this as like Jesus or Buddha or any of these great teachers who we kind of idolize as figureheads in their own self, like up on a shelf, like a little action figure, and they did this, and they're great, and let's listen to all their teachings and follow them and bring them into us. But if you could ever really get to them as the entity of the person, you would see that it's never about them. They don't care about their autobiography. They don't care about the historical references and future people taking a quiz on them and getting all the right answers about their favorite color and where they were born and what their mom did or whatever. It's not personal. It's about the information. It's about the truth. Seeking your truth. Living in unconditional love and appreciation for yourself and this experience here and the earth and everything it encompasses. For you to understand their message and their truth and pick it up and take it into yourself, and like a template, you make it your own and you live through it, you are it. And that's the message, that's the beingness that they wish to pass on and would hope to inspire all to embody, to live within the Gnosis, not to get lost in writing down historical references about that people or getting lost in their workings or their exact words or their that supplied version, the plastered up printed book of information that whoever, some publisher, has decided that that's the right information, the only information you should see on it. That's what we should avoid and get away from. And not to say, like, I'm closing here because, I've talked for half an hour. This comprehending consciousness got a little long. I really am not trying to deter anybody from learning, because I love learning, As I say so many times, I'm born on a 7 day. I have a huge appreciation and, gratitude for information and knowing and knowledge and books and stories. But like I said at the very start, having that underlying faith-based knowing of having your own discernment, being able to gauge information for what is true and what's not, and letting things go, not pulling them in and identifying with them, tying them into your worth or sovereignty in any kind of way. We should be getting totally away from that. So thank you so much if you've listened to this whole episode. I hope you enjoyed this topic of the Gnostics versus Gnosis. I hope you'll tune in to me next time. Not sure what I'm going to talk about yet, but you can always find Comprehending Consciousness on YouTube or BitChute under A. Marie Speaks. If you are looking for anything I'm doing in the meantime, if you want to keep up with me, the best way to see what I'm posting or sharing for podcasts, etc., is over on Telegram at A. Marie Speaks. And you can find me Spotify, BitChute, all of those A. Marie Speaks. amariespeaks.com will be up and running pretty soon within the next couple of weeks. It's been down if you are following live, and it's 2023. What's today? The 28th of January, I think. So, or the 26th. Huh, I'm in the future. Hey, anyways, by February at some point, 2023, A. Marie Speaks will be back up and running. So you can check over there and find me there always. Send me, an email. My email's always in the description. If you have anything, questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. And I will tune into you. Well, you can tune into me, next time. But I tune into you too. It's a give and take of vibration, no matter what. So thank you so much for your service to the collective. Thanks for listening to me ramble for this half an hour and joining me for Comprehending Consciousness. I'll see you next time.